Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Now that Japan's Takaichi has secured a supermajority, what's next for the region and relations with the U.S.? And would the next nuclear arms control treaty include China now that the New START treaty has expired? The U.S. this week accusing China of conducting secret nuclear tests in 2020, using decoupling to mask seismic signals and evade global monitors. China has dismissed the claims as hype. Joining us now to unpack all of this is former diplomat and retired Marine Colonel Grant Newsham. He's a senior fellow at the Center for Security Policy and author of When China Attacks. Grant, thank you so much for joining us. Great to have you. Now, Takaichi thanking President Trump for his warm words regarding the election, adding, quote, "Our alliance and friendship with the United States of America are built on deep trust and close, strong cooperation. The potential of our alliance is limitless." Now that Takaichi's coalition has secured a supermajority, what does that mean for U.S.-Japan relations and the region?
Well, for U.S.-Japan relations, we'll get out of it what we put into it. But you have a Japan that is now willing to really make its defense useful. The Japanese military is not even the sum of its parts, but it has the potential to be a good, solid military. It also, except for the two navies, doesn't work very well with U.S. forces. So Japan can improve its own defense. At the same time, the Americans and the Japanese can have a really sort of a force that combines the two, and that gives you sort of an exponential sort of improvement in U.S.-Japanese free world capabilities in the Pacific. Regionally, you just might get a solidly linked U.S. and a very capable military and also political and economic alignment that actually bolsters the sort of the free world up that a ways. And the Chinese don't like this. They don't like it when their intended victims actually link up and are actually able to defend themselves. So the only people who really don't like what happened today are in Beijing, but for the U.S. and the region, and most of the region does like Japan and wants to see it play a more assertive role militarily. I think they like what they saw.
And inside Japan, reports are saying this paves the way for tax cuts. What can we expect on the financial front in Japan, and does that create a buffer for China or against China?
Well, the Japanese really do need to do something about their tax system. They can't figure out why the economy really hasn't thrived, why people don't have families and children. Well, the Japanese citizens, if you live there for a while, it seems like they exist to be fleeced by the elite class. They have incredibly high taxes and very low salaries, so they're left with almost no money to spend. So the first prime minister who comes along and says, "I'm going to cut taxes," and actually does it so that people have more money, you're going to see a knock-on psychological effect that's going to benefit the economy. So in Japan, which has a decent economy, a strong economy, that translates into sort of the ability to build a stronger military as well, and also more confidence. So Japan does need to do something. Takaichi does need to do something on the economic front because the Japanese citizens, the people who voted for her in huge numbers, voted for her party, they actually expect something, and she's going to have to deliver on that.
I want to switch gears now to nuclear threats because there's been a lot of focus since the New START treaty expired between the U.S. and Russia this week. One of the big revelations of that was the U.S. accusing China of conducting secret nuclear tests in 2020. First, what's your reaction to the tests?
Well, I'm not surprised. I think the Americans knew about it a lot sooner, but I don't think they wanted to reveal it for whatever reason until now. But it just doesn't surprise me. There isn't a sort of a treaty or an agreement that the Chinese have ever signed that they haven't violated. But also it demonstrates as well China's objective, which is to have a nuclear arsenal that is so powerful that nobody will challenge them. And that's their objective, and that's where they aim to get.
On that note, there is also reports that China wants to expand its arsenal to 1,000 warheads by 2030. Secretary of State Marco Rubio actually saying this marks a new era for nuclear arms control, one that must confront both Russia and China. How likely are we to see a broader arms control treaty that would bring in China as well as Russia?
I don't think we're very likely to see that. I think the Chinese would not have much interest in signing it. The Russians as well, I don't think they're particularly keen to do that as well. But the American administration has to sort of thread a needle here because it's trying to point out just how threatening the Chinese and the Russian nuclear arsenals are and what those two countries are doing. But at the same time, it has to act like it wants a treaty. And here's the problem: is that if they do push really strongly for a treaty, you're kind of undercutting the argument that you need to make on Capitol Hill for the spending to build up our own nuclear arsenals, which need to be improved and quickly. Because the argument will be, well, if you're going to have a treaty where everyone reduces their nuclear weapons, why are we going to build more of them? So the administration is talking about this, but I think they have no illusions as to the willingness of the Chinese or the Russians to join in. And with the Chinese, Henry Kissinger said, he figured it out 50 years too late, but he said, we see fixable problems. And solving one of them actually is, for us, that's a solution. To the Chinese, that's just an admission ticket to other problems that they're going to raise and to solve. So it really would solve nothing if you got the Chinese to agree to something like a nuclear arms treaty here. They're just not interested in it, and their objective is very different than what we would expect.
And Grant, looking ahead, what are you watching for in terms of where U.S.-China relations are headed, given there's no trade deal signed yet and regional tensions around Japan, Philippines, and Taiwan?
I'm waiting to see if America really does what it needs to do to stand up to China. And that includes rebuilding the military, getting our industrial base in order, getting our finances in order, and also getting our allies to actually do more as we tell them to do. And there's some room for optimism on the side of with the Japanese. I'm a little concerned that we might try too hard to make a sort of a trade agreement, reach some sort of an agreement with the Chinese that maybe gives up a little too much and lets them get away with too much. I think, though, that Mr. Trump probably understands the threat from the PRC. And he's, I think, hamstrung because of the way they have played their rare earth dominance against us. And that really stopped him in his tracks. But I think he knows what the threat is. And in some ways, you wonder if he's like a man saying to an angry dog, well, good doggy, while he's looking around for a big stick to hit them with. That comes from Richard Armitage. But I hope that that's what Mr. Trump is thinking. But the Chinese are not letting up. Their objectives are very clear. And we either stand up to them, and, along with our friends, and that includes Japan and Takaichi and others that want to join in, or else we're going to find ourselves in a very dangerous position before long.
Well, Grant Newsham, as always, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you. Glad to be here.